Welcome back to the Nevada Department of Wildlife's Introduction to Fly Tying series. Again, I am Jan Nemec and I will be your instructor through these. We have our first fly, the woolly bugger streamer. We're going to be tying a size 4 or size 6 olive woolly bugger, which is an excellent choice for most trout across the board. Start with our hook. It's that size 4 or size 6 streamer hook. This one happens to be 4x long. Anything from 2x to 4x long do nicely. Start our thread. I'm going to hold the tag below the fly or below the hook with my bobbin above. And we'll start wrapping again in that clockwise motion. And we're going to cover that whole shank and build that foundation. One thing I'd like to point out is we really want to try to keep the bobbin close to the fly. It's much easier to keep tension on the wraps as well as make those detailed wraps. When it gets long and too far out, it's really hard to control where the thread is going. So we want to keep it within a couple inches of the shank. I'm going to continue, just build that foundation, make sure I have a good layer of thread down. And we'll look at putting our tail in. Tail is going to be marabou, our strung marabou. We're going to look for a feather that is full and complete. Something that doesn't have a lot of broken ends like the one here. That one looks pretty good. Alright, to clean up that marabou feather, I'm going to grasp the barb, or the stem, excuse me, and then I'm going to pull some of this extra material or this fluffy stuff, pull against the stem or down the stem to strip the material. Leave a fair amount to create a nice tail. To put the tail in, we're going to use the pinch. So with my left hand, I'm going to grasp the tail between my pointer finger and my thumb, creating that valley on the underside. My tail length, I want it to be about the length of the body or the length of the shank. So our tail, ideally, should be about that long. I'm going to take that again in the pinch. Take our thread back to the back of the fly. Pinch goes on. I'm going to make a couple loose wraps and then some tight ones to secure the material. Ideally, we're going to try to keep that material on top of the shank. From here, I'm going to wrap the thread back and I'm going to actually keep the tail on the fly or on the shank and wrap all the way just about back to the eye. One thing I want to point out is we're always going to leave ourselves plenty of space between our ending material and our eye. You can see there's about 1/8 of an inch there. Because none of this underside will be seen, it doesn't have to be real pretty. Just want to try to keep it consistent diameter. Next up is our body material, or our chenille. Pull off a little portion of that. And then to tie this in, I'm actually going to use that diagonal drop method. So we'll place the material about 45 degrees in front of the shank. Make a couple looser wraps and follow them up with some tighter ones to bind the material down. Now we've got our tail secured, body material in. Finally, we're going to add our hackle. Hackle, if using the strung hackle, the feathers tend to be a little bit larger than if you're using feathers off an actual saddle, the skin itself. Here I'm going to use one of our Grizzly woolly bugger saddles. To prepare the saddle hackle ahead of time, we're going to create a tag or a place to tie the material in. It's going to be tied in tip first, so the point end of the feather. To create that tag or that tie-in point, I'm going to grab the tip and gently pull some of those individual barbs back, really just to open up the feather, like so. From here, we're going to use this section as our actual tag or our tie-in point. I'm going to use that same method, the diagonal drop, with our hackle feather. So we'll take our thread back to the back of the hook, and this will be our last piece that we're going to tie in. And we'll carry our thread all the way up to the head or the eye of the hook. Now it's time to put it together. We're going to start with our body material, our chenille. We're going to start wrapping that, covering our thread at the back, and then wrapping one wrap next to the last, trying to create a consistent diameter body all the way just about to the eye. Again, we're going to leave ourselves some space between the eye and where we finish that material. To tie off or to secure this material, I'm going to make 2 thread wraps on the left-hand side of the material, 2 thread wraps on the right-hand side of the material, and then 2 more on the left. This really helps to secure the material in place, keep it from coming unraveled. From here, we can trim this short as possible. We'll make some cleanup wraps just to make sure it's down. Finally, I'm going to wrap my hackle. This is certainly the best part. To do so, I am going to gently grasp that saddle feather. If you pull too hard at this point, that stem on the tip is pretty soft, so it's really easy to break your hackle feather at this point. Just like the body, I'm going to start wrapping forward, and instead of making one wrap next to the last, I'm actually going to leave some space in between each wrap. Continue forward. Just like our body material, I'm going to secure this by making 2 wraps on the left-hand side, 2 wraps on the right, and again 2 more wraps on the left-hand side. At this point, you can trim your hackle, and we'll make those final securing wraps in the head. From here, we're going to tie our final knot or put that half hitch to finish the fly. With our coffee straw, I'm going to place it down on the thread, forward, make those 2 wraps from right to left on the straw, and then we're going to bring that up to the eye and pull those 2 thread wraps off, and they'll be placed between the eye and the end of the material itself. At this point, we can trim the thread, and we're going to use a little bit of super glue here to just make sure it doesn't come apart. And that is our woolly bugger streamer.